We were supposed to leave on the 4th of April, and I think Canada closed their borders around the 18th of March. So we were living in an empty apartment, and the day Canada closed the borders, we had 24 hours to get on a flight, or 48 hours, and the company that hired my husband was ringing up saying, can you get on a flight? And I was thinking, how do we get, like, there were bits of furniture still in our apartment, and I was thinking, how do we get it all? Do I know somebody that could get rid of it? And to have that in 48 hours, it was like, oh my goodness. We weren't ready, but we actually had to be out of that apartment in 5 days. It was crazy.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode number 32 of the Emigrant Life podcast, where we share stories of people who left their country to chase a better life. And through these stories, you can find ideas, resources, and motivation to do the same. I'm Daniel De Biasi, and in this episode, I had the pleasure to chat with Kimberley. Kimberley lives in Australia, where she was born. So technically, she's not an immigrant, even though she left her country and lived abroad for several years. But because she married a French guy, and she still has a big desire to travel and live outside of her own country, she thinks and plans her life like an immigrant. They were about to move to Canada when the pandemic started last year. They already sold their house and shipped their stuff to Canada, but the border was shut and they had to rethink of the whole situation. Kimberley is an English teacher, which allowed her to live and work in France and Italy. And last year she launched her podcast called Accented, where she interviews people from all over the world to help others getting used to different accents through normal conversation. Before moving to my conversation with Kimberley, I'd like to ask you a favor. I want to make this podcast as helpful as possible for you to move abroad. I'd like to hear from you what you like about this podcast and what you don't. What topics you like to hear more and what you'd be more helpful. If you could send me a quick email at daniel@emigrantlife.com with your feedback, it would be very helpful for me to understand where I can do better to help you and other immigrants. And now, please enjoy my conversation with Kimberley. Hi, Kimberley. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
No worries. It's a pleasure having you. Kimberley, your story is a little bit different because you're originally from Australia and you lived in Europe for a while. You married a French guy. And now you're back in Sydney. You're back in Australia.
Yes.
So let's start from the beginning. So, what age did you leave Australia, and why did you decide to leave Australia?
Well, I found out that I've left at the same age as what you left Italy. I was 27, and I left because that's what most Australians do. I don't know. It's something when you go to high school. It's like, are you going to go traveling after school, or are you going to go study? And I went later on. Probably because I got into the course I wanted to straight after high school. And then, I don't know, I didn't know if I could. And then by the time I was 27, I was lucky. I have a British passport, probably not that useful now in Europe. But having a British passport, I thought I may as well use it. And I was going to go to London, but I think knowing that I could live anywhere in Europe was really enticing, and I've always wanted to learn a second language. So yeah, I left and I went to Italy, and there was a job opportunity there, so I ended up there. It wasn't like, oh, I want to go to Italy. I actually wanted to go to Spain. If I did want to go somewhere, it was Spain, and I don't know why. I just ended up in Italy by accident, sort of thing.
So it was just a way to visit other country. It wasn't really like I'm going to move away, I'm going to leave Australia, I'm going to live somewhere else.
Well, it wasn't. But then after living in Italy, I actually thought I could live there for a while. I think to start with, it's like, oh, I'm just going to go away and travel. But then after a year in Italy, I thought, oh, I could continue here for quite a few years. There wasn't... Yeah, you're right. It was first to just go traveling, but I know when I got there, I wasn't thinking of racing home.
And did you say you had a UK passport?
Yes, because my dad's born in Scotland, so I have a British passport.
Sweet.
It is sweet.
And how did you find a job in Italy?
What happened? I went online. I guess, I don't know, maybe just going directly to the UK sounded a bit boring for me, because that's what all Australians did, and I kind of wanted to be different. And I went online. I think there was an advertisement. So they'd advertised on some job site to be an au pair, and it was for 2 months. And I thought, while on the way to the UK, I could stop in Italy and do 2 months there for the summer. And then they did an interview with me and they said, do you want to just teach English? You'll go to the beach every day. You just have to speak in English, read a few books, do like an hour of English exercises. And I thought, yeah, why not, until I get to London. But then Italy was just the food. Everything was magnificent in Italy. Just the culture. It was a cultural shock, really. I know, like, we're European. Well, I've got European heritage and it was different. So different.
I mean, I think it's different, like a culture, like a British culture, like a Scottish or English. It's different from other cultures like Italians or French or even Spain.
I know it is, but you just think, like I think an Asian culture would be really different. But the Italians were so different. I just thought because, I know I haven't been brought up in Europe, but that whole European background and, I just thought it would be exactly the same. Well, not exactly the same, but similar. But it was a cultural shock as well.
Oh, I bet I had a cultural shock when from Italy I went to Spain, just because the time difference. They were having dinner at 10 o'clock at night. That for me was a shock. My brother and I, we went to Madrid for a weekend, and we were like 7 o'clock at night. We were starving. That's the time we usually have dinner. We went to the restaurant. There was nobody there. Nobody. The shop was still open. Everybody's still working at 7 o'clock at night. That was for me. It was a cultural shock. So imagine you from Australia going to Italy.
Oh, yeah, but I do like the siestas that you kind of do that a little bit in Italy. Well, maybe in the summertime. Most people
they
go
do, and now it doesn't make any sense to me. People like stop working from 12 until 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, why would you do that? It makes sense like for a shop. Because, I mean, you finish working like a normal job, you finish at 5, the store closes at 7:30, so you have time to go shopping. I'm talking to my brother, and my brother is like, I have like an hour and a half every day. He doesn't work in the store.
Yeah.
But like, you need time. You have to go home, have lunch, and have a nap. How can you do that without an hour and a half of break? It's like, doesn't make any sense to me now, but it used to.
That's so funny. No.
Was that your first time in Europe?
No, it wasn't my first time in Europe. No, I'd been to Germany on exchange. I'd actually learnt German at high school, and I went on exchange when I was 16. And I'd visited the US before that and Asia. Like, I've actually been really interested in going to some more Asian countries. But it'd been probably about 10 years since I'd been in Europe.
Okay, so maybe like an age was different. Probably you were there on your own. Maybe that would make a little bit of difference.
Yeah, I went on my own.
And what kind of job did you find? Like you say you were like doing something with English. It was like a teacher or something?
Yeah, so then the same agency that hired me, and it was quite funny because they said to me, oh, do you want to go to Germany? Because this same agency had jobs in Germany. And I said, look, I haven't learnt German in so long, and I'm actually really interested to learn Italian. So after it, they said, look, there's school, and I just got my teaching degree in Australia. So, and that was another reason I waited too, because I noticed a lot of Australians go and they work in bars and cafes and they go stay in hostels. And I thought, you know what, I want to have sort of a career so that I could afford to do things that I wanted. Not that teachers make a lot of money either.
No.
But I got a job in an international primary school. I was teaching, so just an English classroom teacher. So most of my students were little Italian kids, and they were going to an intensive English school.
And could you teach English in Italy without knowing Italy, or you knew a little bit of Italian?
I think it's better to actually not know any of the language to teach English. And I learned that from the French, actually. The French don't teach you French and they don't translate. No, they just teach you French. That's it. And I think it's a really good way to immerse yourself.
Yeah, that's true. It can be frustrating when you learn a language, especially at the first few lessons. If you don't know anything what the teacher says, it just could be very frustrating.
Yeah, and I think now I think immersion is fantastic. It can be difficult to start with, but you get it. So no, I didn't. I learned a lot of Italian from the kids, and they were all coming with different dialects, some of them. But the students actually, because they were about 5 and 6, they'd actually started going to preschool from 3. Yeah, so they already had English from 3 years of age. So it wasn't like I was teaching them English for the first time. And so some of these, I remember I had a 5-year-old who spoke French, Italian and English. So some of them had multiple languages.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And whereabout did you go in Italy?
So this was in Milan.
Okay.
My au pairing experience was for 2 months over the summer, and I au paired in Santa Margherita. After that, I went into a school in Milan, and I worked in Milan for 2 years.
Okay, so you were lucky with the accent. People from Milan, usually they have like a neutral accent. If you go somewhere else in Italy, the accent could be quite different and very hard to understand.
Yeah, it's actually quite funny because when I went to France after 2 years in Italy, I would go to speak French and everybody kept asking me if I was Italian because I was obviously making the accent sound Italian. I guess some of the words are so similar. Like, what is it? Like May, I think in French, and I would be saying my. Like I was saying it in trying to say it in the Italian way. And people are like, and I just pronounce a lot of stuff but the Italian way.
That's funny. And do you think, because you are a teacher, do you think being a teacher is actually pretty helpful when you decide to move abroad to find a job? Because especially if you're an English teacher, you can teach English anywhere in the world, right?
Yes. What I find strange is most English speakers I find in these countries teach English, but they're not teachers. So it's like when you turn up to a country and if you need the language and you don't have it, you automatically become an English teacher.
Yeah.
So the good thing with me is that I could work in the schooling system, which I think is paid a little better than working at an adult school. Because I think in between, I actually didn't go directly into the job in Italy. I remember I just went there and stayed there. And I tried with a company to teach adults, to teach business English. Mm-hmm. And you would go into companies in Milan and the pay was quite different to what it was in a school. So when I did get that school job, I took it.
Was actually paid more working for a school than working for a company?
Yes. Working for an international school, yes.
I thought it was the opposite. A company would pay more than a school, but...
No. And I think if you became a private tutor, that would be different. But the adult schools, I find you don't need as many qualifications. If you speak English, you can go teach.
Okay.
So I do find that's good that I have an English degree because at least I have more variety. But then, if I ever want to change careers, there's not much out there for me when I see people from other professions who can only be English teachers.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. But in your case, it could be, wasn't the case when you went to Europe because you had a passport, a UK passport. But now that you're moving to Canada or you're planning to move to Canada, which we're going to ask you more questions later, having this qualification could be easier for you to get a visa or get to the immigration process.
I guess so. I'm sure it would. But then also in Italy, there is a rule, because I know the school I worked at, they loved having Australian teachers. And there's some sort of visa that Australian teachers can go over and work for 2 years. So they're always rotating teachers for 2 years. But it's always great when you have the passport because the school's like, fantastic, I don't even have to pay a visa and you can stay longer. But I do know when I left Italy after 2 years and I went to Paris, France, the school that did hire me, they wouldn't have been able to afford a visa for me. And they said that to me. So I was really lucky that I had a passport because they wouldn't have done it. So that's the thing too. Some schools, it depends on the competition. If they can prove that they don't have enough English teachers, but then again, Europe can just, back then, I don't know about now with Brexit, but Europe could take anybody from England and take them as a teacher. So that's easier for them to do than to take an Australian.
Okay. And how did you end up in France, in Paris?
Meeting a Frenchman. That's it. I met a Frenchman in Italy. So
that's where you met your husband.
Yeah. That's what took me to Paris. And that's funny because I met him through my Italian friends and my husband was just visiting. He, I guess, as you do in Europe, you can go over to Italy for the weekend. And my Italian friends introduced me to him. And then we kept in contact. He went back to France and we just kept messaging each other. And then, seeing each other long distance for a year. And then it's like I couldn't make him move to Italy. And I had no real connection to Italy. I was just there as a traveller. It made more sense for me to move to France. And that makes sense as well as an English teacher. I can get a job anywhere.
Yeah, and for you it was a new experience anyway.
Yes, but I was very sad to leave Italy. Very sad.
Yeah, I know. Food in Italy is better.
My husband would disagree, but yes, the food is amazing. And I just loved the culture. I loved the nightlife in Italy. I loved going out in Milan and in the summer in Milan. And yeah, it was cool. Yeah,
Milan has got a pretty good nightlife.
Yeah, the aperitivos, the everything. I just loved it. So, and France it's interesting because you do see the cultural difference between the French and the Italian, whereas the Italians are very loud and, you know, when you go out in Milan, it's all fun and everyone's enjoying themselves in the parks and it's just this atmosphere, whereas Paris was a lot quieter and very... a lot of pubs like in the UK, which I thought was interesting. I didn't realise it would be like that and people just catch up and they're very quiet and very thoughtful in their conversations. A lot of conversations about politics.
Is that just Paris or you think that's just the French culture?
I don't know. It's and of course this is just stereotypes, of course, but it was just interesting to see... I found in Italy, everybody was always asking me where I was from. And I guess because Italians immigrate a lot of people were saying, I've got an uncle in Australia or I've got a cousin there. So they're always very interested to find out where you're from because you guys went everywhere. Like I even met people, they're like, my family immigrated to Brazil or my family immigrated here. The Italians are just all over the world. And
it's not very common though, at least from my experience. There's not many people that leave Italy for good. They usually go somewhere, especially Australia. There's a good destination and then come back a year later.
Yes, in this era, but think about like after World War II, there were hundreds of Italians that came to Australia.
Oh yes, that time, yes, absolutely. There's a lot here in Vancouver.
Yeah, and that's what happened and that's what I found. Like people would say, my uncle took his family, or great uncle, they all went over. So they still know that they've got a connection over there. And whereas the French don't really immigrate, they are now, which is interesting because I'm in Sydney now, and there's a massive French community here, which is huge. When I grew up, I didn't know anybody who was French, but they don't have that history like the Italians do. So it's interesting. That's what I found, the difference, where people always wanted to know where I was from and, they would tell me little bits about Australia or, they have some connection there where there wasn't a huge connection in France with Australia.
I don't know for French people, but Italians love people that are coming from English-speaking country. We look up to people that speak English. For us, it's like Americans are super cool of that. So if you speak English, you're cool in Italy.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's the same kind of thing in France, but probably that's why you got that kind of like a reaction from people, because it's not very common to see people that speaks English in Italy. And when you see it, it's something cool.
I guess in Paris, a lot of people speak English and people were very helpful, I found. The first time I went to Paris, I absolutely had no French, and my husband at the time, he wasn't there. I remember I came over from Italy to look for a job, and so I had to get a plane over, try and navigate the bus system without any French. And I was actually quite surprised. This woman who spoke no English could see that I was lost and looking at a map, and she came over and tried to help me, and not knowing any English. And so I've always found that people were generally very polite and kind in Paris, which is great. But I just found that there wasn't that real interest like in Italy to know where I was from. Whereas I found they had some more of a connection with me, and either a lot of their family moving away after the war, just like how my dad, he came out to Australia after the war too. There were that's basically what Australia's made up of, a lot of people coming out here for a better life.
Yeah. And why did you guys decide to move back to Australia?
So I spent 3 years in Paris. I love Paris. Sometimes I see lots of things Parisian, and I'm like, oh, I'd love to go back there. But life in Paris is hard. It's easy here in Australia.
What do you mean?
People work a lot in Paris. People are quite stressed. It's a big city life. For my son, we couldn't get him a daycare. It's very difficult. I think it may have changed now, but when I lived there, it was 2014. My son was born there. I wanted to go back to work, and only 1 out of 10 Parisian kids get a place at the crèche, at the daycare centre.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and they go back to work fairly quickly. Most women go back to work after 3 months of having their baby, whereas in Australia, a lot of women might go back when their child's 2 years old. So it's another cultural difference. So I couldn't find a crèche. And then when I worked out paying for a nanny, I didn't see the point of working. And it's actually interesting because culturally, that's not a thing to do, to stay at home with your child either. But I just found we were finding it really difficult to find care. It just wasn't. And I guess we're very lucky here in Australia. It's not a cold country, and we go to the beach all year round. So I think it's just easier. We didn't have a car. You get the metro everywhere. Like, I can't even imagine, with COVID at the moment, how they do with public transport and trying to, minimise people passing on, this virus. It would be so difficult. Like the metro was always packed every day. In Australia, we have so much space. And
that's true, but at the same time, that was life before COVID.
Exactly.
People to go to the
office. Of course.
But no, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I'm just thinking how, we didn't have a car, and that was fine. We didn't need a car, but yeah, and everything's smaller. I lived in 50 square meters in Paris. I loved it. I love looking at all the architecture and all the beautiful places, but 50 square meters with a baby and a child, the main reason was children. That was the main reason we left, not because of anything else. I actually really liked the lifestyle. And you know what, if I had a lot of money, I'd be happy to live in Paris, but it's an expensive city.
Yeah, I bet it is. It's actually Paris is one of my favorite cities in Europe. I love Paris.
I do.
Every time, love it.
Maybe I would love, maybe when I think my kids would appreciate it more as teenagers. I don't think it's a great city for little kids. Australia's great for little kids.
They got more things to do.
Yeah, but my son plays soccer every weekend. Everybody's playing sport. My son's in a soccer team. It's just a very outdoor sort of country. We spent our weekend at the beach.
Yeah, but if your son likes soccer, probably Italy is the place to be.
It is. It is the place to be. But I mean, I don't know, if I didn't notice this so much in France. I don't know if they do in Italy, but they really, it's normal for parents to spend the whole Saturday here just with their kids, watching them play sport. We do that each weekend. He plays for a little team. He plays. I just feel that we get a lot out of being here with a little family. I think I would love to go back to Paris when the kids are teenagers, because that cultural side of things they'd be able to see.
Yeah.
And enjoy more than what they would as little kids.
Yeah, especially if you live in a city. I mean, if you live in a city, kids can go out by themselves. Maybe, I don't know where you live, but
yeah,
I grew up in a small town where I like the last year of like a preschool, I used to go to preschool by myself on a bicycle because it was safe. And you can't do that in a city. Kids need to be supervised, and it's a different lifestyle.
Yeah. Look, I think if we lived in the country in France, it would be totally different. And I think we would be able to have more of that. We would get our kids in a place in daycare. It even gets hard, like bureaucratically as well. Like for some reason, France wouldn't give me a driver's license. And that was just tiring, having to deal with the bureaucratic system and trying to explain why I have 2 passports and them not understanding why I'm Australian, but I also have a British passport. So that, it's, I think, and it was the same in Italy too, which is quite funny. We got married in Italy, but because France and Italy have such old laws, they end up becoming... They don't accommodate modern things sometimes. And even though Australia is a very old country and we've got an old history with our Indigenous Australians, I guess because we have modern laws, they seem to be more flexible, whereas the laws in Italy and France, like I had a wedding planner planning our marriage, and it was so complicated because of my 2 passports. I'm Australian. And then the old law is because I had a British passport, I had to send a notice to the town I'm from the UK. I said, well, I'm not from the UK. I don't have a town to say that I'm getting married because they need to advertise it for 6 weeks before some bizarre law. I said, and they said, well, you need to get married as an Australian. I said, well, I don't have a visa. And they're like, yeah, you can't get married as an Australian. So I had to go through the embassy, and then they were like, oh, you're marrying a Frenchman, but in Italy. It was so complicated. And then in the end, the wedding planner found a law that if I stayed at a hotel the week before the wedding and I showed the receipt from the hotel, that I could get married as an Australian without a visa. It's just bizarre. And then this is what is so complicated too. Like, you'd think that France and Italy are next door to each other. Then, like, they wouldn't send the document to France and, for my husband to show that he got married. And it was just, even the day after our wedding, I needed to, and this was because I knew I may come back to Australia because I'm very forward thinking. And so in Australia, to be a teacher, you always need a police certificate from anywhere you've ever worked. So I got a police certificate from Italy. And then I needed something on my marriage certificate. I needed a stamp because I got married in Verona. So I needed a stamp from there. So the day after my wedding, I needed to go and see somebody. I went to the council and I was like, I need this stamp on my marriage certificate so that I can show if I ever go back to Australia that I can teach, and then I've got this police certificate, this check because I lived here. And then they're like, oh, the person you need to see is not on today. And I was like, oh my God.
Sounds so Italian.
It does. And then I said, please, I said, I live in Milan. I'm leaving for France. And I just said, please, I got to go back to Milan because this is all in Verona. And I was like, can you just go into that person's office and get that stamp? And eventually they did. And they stamped it. Thank goodness. Because I was like, I can't come back here. But just little things like that you need to prove. And, it was just, that was hard in Italy and France, the bureaucratic system.
Yeah, no, I understand. Even sometimes I need some paperwork from Italy. It's just a nightmare. I tried to ask my mom to do it the first time, and the second time, no, I'm going to pay somebody to do it because it's just a nightmare.
Because even that police certificate, if I lose that, I can't get that again unless I'm in Italy. Like, it's crazy. I can't just go online and go, can you send this to me to Australia? And then what's even crazier is I wanted something from France, and their rule is that all your certificates have to be less than 3 months old. So that police certificate that I have is worth nothing. So for me to apply for something in France, because I was thinking about getting citizenship there, I have to go and get that certificate again that's 3 months old. Or I can wait until it's longer than 10 years that I haven't been in Italy. So I'm doing that. I'm doing the 10-year wait because that's just easier.
Probably, yeah.
It's crazy, these laws.
Yeah, because the police certificate, they don't release it in English. They only release it in Italian, and you have to translate it.
Yes, and I think there was something to do with that too. That's why I needed the stamp, because I got a qualified English translator to do it. So I needed all these stamps, and I don't know why I needed this particular stamp from Verona, but I needed it.
My mom have to apply for the police certificate. She's got it in Italian. They have to translate it by a professional, and then I have to go back to in front of the judge. Somebody that doesn't have to be related with my family, has to be a stranger that nobody knows, has to be in front of the judge and swear in front of the judge that the translation is accurate.
Wow.
So my mom needs to find somebody that is not related to my family, a stranger, and go to the front of the judge and swear that the certificate was correct. It's crazy.
It's funny you say that too, because when we went to Verona, I needed to go there as well to have 4 witnesses or 5 witnesses. This was before the wedding. And we go there, and I thought I had the 4 witnesses, and I think then it ended up being 5. Like, and then we had to grab somebody from the corridor and go, "Can you please just come in here and just sign this?" Because we were like, "What?" Like, and I'd brought everybody from Milan to Verona. Like, there was just so much paperwork. Like, it was so difficult. Now that I remember this, like, I can laugh now, but just to get married overseas, I could, you know what? But I think there was less paperwork in Italy than there would have been in France.
Really?
Yeah.
Even though your husband is French?
Yeah, I think it would have been more complicated. Because supposedly in France, you have to get married in the city that, like, where you live. So it has to be done in one of the centres of, where your address is.
I think you have to do the same thing in Italy, but only if you get married in a church, I think.
Yeah, and this is it has to be in your community hall, because I guess the French aren't as big on churches. Like, they're fine if you don't have to get married in a church, but it has to be in your it does. I'm pretty sure that's the rule. It has to be in your community. So you can't really choose. Like, you could have the reception somewhere else, but the actual marriage taking place has to be in your local council area.
I'm pretty sure it's the same in Italy, I think. Yeah.
Yes, but the thing with Italy, if you're foreign, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so
but if your husband would be Italian, they probably had the same problem.
Yeah, probably the same problem. That's why it was good to do it in Italy. And Verona was just beautiful. I just can't believe how cheap it was to have a wedding in Italy. Like, it was amazing.
Really?
Yeah, we were going to get married in Milan, but in Verona it was way cheaper. And I think Verona is really beautiful, like with the Colosseum in the city, and just all my photos. You didn't need a professional photographer. It's just the photos look amazing. So
the next chapter will be Canada, you said?
Possibly, but I don't know now. Now with everything with COVID, who knows? I think not until everything's back to normal. It would have been nice. We were really looking forward to Canada. I've heard Montreal's a truly bilingual city. Our kids are bilingual. And I think what I was looking forward to was not, we live in Australia, and, that's really my country. I lived in France. That's my husband's country. Canada could have been our, a
natural territory.
Yeah, and that's what I was really looking forward to. And I thought this is, I really think travel is great. I really wanted my kids to experience that. I travelled all over Australia as a kid. Sydney, I live in Sydney now. I've been here for the last 5 years. I've never lived in Sydney before. So this isn't my home city. I do love Sydney though. It's a great city. But I've lived everywhere growing up. I'm a traveller. So I was excited to do that with my kids.
Yeah, because you told me that you guys were pretty much ready to leave Australia to go to Canada, even sold your house and everything. You pretty much ready to leave before the COVID started.
We were supposed to leave on the 4th of April, and I think Canada closed their borders around the 18th of March. So we were living in an empty apartment, and the day Canada closed the borders, we had 24 hours to get on a flight, or 48 hours, and the company that hired my husband was ringing up saying, "Can you get on a flight?" And I was thinking, how do we get, there were bits of furniture still in our apartment, and I was thinking, how do we get it all? Do I know somebody that could get rid of it. And to have that in 48 hours, it was like, oh my goodness. We weren't ready, but we actually had to be out of that apartment in 5 days. It was crazy. So 3 weeks ago, we just bought a house in Sydney, and the last 8 months we've been living in an Airbnb. So since that April, we've been waiting and just waiting, thinking, oh, we'll go to Canada July. We'll go to Canada September. And then they did ask, we could have gone in January, like this month, but we decided that it's not a good idea with everybody in lockdown. We're not really in lockdown here in Australia. It's just not, unfortunately. We got all our boxes back because we packed our boxes in February. I said to my husband, let's start shipping it to Canada now. And so we just, now that we've moved into a house and we're going to stay here for a while, we got all our boxes back. And that was actually quite a sad day. As happy as we are to be here, to see all those boxes come back with our names on it to Canada, it was like, oh, it's not happening.
No, especially when you put your mind into something that you get excited to start a new life in a new country here and doesn't go through. It just, it's a little bit disappointing.
It is. But on the other side, we are so lucky and grateful for, I think at this time, it's good to have, if we go into another lockdown, it's nice to know we've got friends here and people who can help out. I don't know who I would have known in Montreal. And I don't know if people are open to meeting people either. Like how much are people open to meeting people now?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you move to a new country, you're trying to integrate, but right now that's not the time to do any of that. Even finding a job, it's much harder.
Yeah, and I know I saw how hard it was for my husband when we moved to Australia as an immigrant, trying to look for work and them going, oh, you don't have any Australian experience. Like on the other side, how am I going to find work? I know that people are going to have preferences over me as well. Of course, any country is going to try and give their own workers a job before they give it to other people. So, I don't know how long I would have been out of work too.
Yeah, because if you are like an English teacher and you teach English in a foreign country where the English is a second language, it's much easier. If you're trying to teach English in Canada, even though you will be Montreal, which is English will be the second language, but there's so many Canadians that can teach English.
There's so many Canadians. There's so many, and so much competition, and I don't even know what my visa really was. I just know I was getting a working visa because my husband had a job. So and my French is pretty good, but it's, there are going to be Canadians out there that are completely bilingual and can read and converse in French fluently. So,
And they're going to be in front of you just because they're in the country. Of course, the company before hired a foreigner needs to prove that there's no any other people in the country to do the same job.
Exactly.
So it's hard to do that.
Look, I didn't want it to ruin my experience. I think if we went, it could have made our experience horrible. We'd be putting ourselves in a situation that was unnecessary.
Yeah. No. I understand. Right now, it's tougher than it used to be. Moving abroad is definitely much tougher than it used to be in 2019.
Yeah, and we have the choice. That's why I consider myself lucky, because if we didn't have a choice, we would be there.
Yeah.
Whereas we are so lucky that we still have jobs here in Australia, and we don't have to go. And I think that what I'm so grateful for is the choice to decide whether or not. And
why, when you guys pick Canada, why did you decide Canada? Because before, early in the interview, you said you would like to explore some other country like India, not India, like Asia.
Yeah. And actually India, I would love to. And you know what? I think once you have kids, you become safer.
You reckon?
Yeah, but I'm thinking of my kids. That's all I'm thinking. Look, Asia I would do. Actually, my husband and I would love to do Asia in a heartbeat. Hong Kong, we've always spoken about Hong Kong being a place that we would love to go to work. And if we had any opportunity, Japan, oh my goodness. But I don't know anybody, not a lot of people can get into Japan. But if we had the opportunity to work in Japan, I would be there. Oh my goodness. That would be amazing. Canada was like, I started thinking of the kids' schools. I started thinking about their education and about healthcare and about those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So my husband would have loved to have gone to the United States of America, whereas I, on the other hand, I'm thinking of safety. I'm thinking of, there's I don't like the whole, the gun laws in the US. I don't particularly want to be there with my family. I do like the US. I've visited it before I've had kids, and I think it's there are lovely parts of the US, and I would love to visit it. And that's why I said to my husband, well, Canada I'd feel a lot more safer in. And I also like the fact that Montreal, the kids could go to school in French but also have English. I just like that mix. And Canadians, they're like the nicest people on the planet. And I think a lot of people say Australians and Canadians are very similar with their mentality. And I just thought, well, we're not moving too far from, we like the Australian way of life. And I hear Canadians are like that. And but it's just they have very cold winters. That's the only thing.
Yeah, I mean, most of the Canada, yes, winter is very cold. Or Vancouver is mild, but rains a lot. So you have to pick between the snow and rain.
That's the only reason. And you know what? My husband and I said we will never move anywhere unless we have a job opportunity there. There was a job opportunity. So. Okay,
especially with kids. You can't afford to just move and not having a job and just go and follow the flow.
We did that with Australia. And my husband was very stressed out. You have to live with the in-laws for a little while. he was getting, I said to him, it's easy to find a job. I had a job before I hopped off the plane. Like, it was easy for me. I didn't realize how hard it is for someone who's not Australian.
Was he allowed to work in the country?
Yeah, he had a visa.
Okay.
But then also we weren't looking in Sydney. We were looking in Brisbane. We were looking in other places like where my family's from. Sydney is a lot easier. Now I understand Sydney is expensive, but I understand why there's a lot of foreigners here. It's easier to find work. But it was difficult. It's difficult to find work as an immigrant. I didn't realise that.
And does your husband was fluent in English?
Yeah, he was fluent in English. We did all the IELTS test before we came over. I didn't speak any French when I met him, so we converse in English most of the time. So his English is really high. Like, he's lived here 5 years now, and now his English is incredible. But it was fine. There was nothing wrong with his English. I think we were in a smaller city, and it was interesting because a lot of people were saying you don't have Australian experience, which I was really surprised by.
Oh, was that the things that were stopping him to find a job because he didn't have any experience in Australia?
Yeah. So how do you get the experience in Australia?
Yeah.
It's like, so from then on, but he was very lucky. He found a job within 3 months, but we had to move to Sydney. We were really trying to be close to my parents, which is an hour and a half flight from Sydney. So about a 12-hour drive in the car.
Like another country in Europe.
It is. It basically is. And because they're in a different state, I still can't see them because all the borders are shut. So it's like living in a different country.
Can I ask you what kind of job does your husband do?
He's an engineer.
Okay. So it's not a difficult job to find if you're an engineer, but
no,
I guess, you need, that's probably because you're an engineer. Maybe that's why they required you to have some experience in Australia.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's because it's a small town where my parents are from. Like, it's still a city. It's a small city, but it's also competitive. That's the problem. After about 2 months of my husband looking, we said, okay, well, I said, you move to Australia. I said, I'll move to wherever you get work. For me, it's easy. I just work in a school. I can go anywhere. That's what's great. But we love Sydney now. So it was even difficult to make the move to Sydney, to go, okay, let's go to Canada, because we didn't need to. I think we wanted to as well. We felt that if the longer we stay in a place, the harder it is to leave.
Oh, yeah. Totally. I mean, you find your comfort, you find your people and friends. It's,
Yeah.
definitely harder.
Who knows? Even if the opportunity comes up to Canada, who knows if we'll want to do it again? I don't know. But I'm glad we did it. I'm not upset that we didn't, because at least I can say I did everything in my power to do it. It's just what happened. Wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
Everything that's happened.
No, and really we need to see how this COVID situation is evolving.
Yeah.
How the border is going to be. There's so many things right now that are uncertain for people that move abroad, even like visa application, how long it's going to take to have your visa if you don't have a visa, all this kind of thing that makes everything much harder.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know, but there's so many Australians locked out of Australia at the moment that can't get in. The moment you leave, it's very difficult to get back in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because we're only allowing so many into the country each day that there are quite a few Australians stranded and they're trying to get back in.
Oh.
That's the scary part too, is if we got to Canada and we wanted to come back, Air Canada is no longer flying to Australia at the moment.
Yeah, there's so many regulations right now.
Yeah.
I think even the cost for flying is probably more expensive than it used to be, just because there's less flights and less people on the airplane.
Yeah.
You can't find a good deal for like a flight right now. It's impossible.
No, not at all.
All of that makes more complicated to move abroad. And the main thing, how you said before, even if you move to a new country, when you move to a new country, how are you going to meet new people? How are you going to integrate with your new culture? And integrating with the people and meeting new people from that country, that's what makes the experience worth it.
Exactly. And that's what I had to think about. Because I know in the beginning, I was like, no, we're going. And then I really had to think about it and just go, what is the experience I want? And at the moment, that's not the experience that I want.
Hopefully in the future we'll do another episode. Will tell me where you went to and your experience post-COVID and post all of this.
Yes, definitely. But no, I have, I think a lot of Australians are very open-minded to where they go to live. My sister's lived in the Middle East now for over 10 years. You know, I don't see myself going, I'm going to stay in Australia for the rest of my life. And I wouldn't think like that because I have a French husband. I've got to be open to the fact that one day he might go, I want to go back to France for a little while. You know?
Or even just be closer to, because even if you move to Canada, it will be closer to France than it is from Australia.
No, that's it. And it's quite sad because our flights were going over France. We were going to stay in France for a little bit. We're going to stay in the Middle East with my sister. And then we were going to go to Montreal. So we were going to take some holidays before we got there and visit people. And so it's, and we were just thinking, you know, it'll be, I think it's a 6 or 7 hour flight to Paris. It could be easier to go see family in France. So.
And vice versa. Family and friends can come over and see you.
Exactly.
It's much easier to convince people to get on a flight for 6 hours than for 24.
Exactly. That's true. That is true. So, you know, even now I've got relatives in Scotland and, you know, they may even want to come over, which would have been cool.
Yeah. Alrighty. Thank you very much, Kimberley, for taking the time to do this interview and share your story.
Yes, thank you.
Hopefully we'll do another one in the near future.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll let you know.
Yeah. Keep me posted. Oh, hey, sorry. At this point, I usually ask my guests where people can find them if you have any question for them, if you want to get in touch with them. But in this episode, I completely forgot, so I apologize for that. But you can find Kimberley on Instagram. Just search for Kim Accented. On Instagram, you can find her. And if you want to improve your listening skills in English, you should definitely check it out, her podcast, Accented, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And as usual, you can find all the links on the show notes at emigrantlife.com/episode 32.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. You can find the show notes with everything we discussed in this episode and the links to get in touch with Kimberley at emigrantlife.com/episode 32. If you want to support the show, you can share this episode and you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. That will help others finding this show and help more people. Do you want to be my next guest and share your story on this podcast? Visit emigrantlife.com/yourstory. Thanks again for listening. Talk to you in the next one. Ciao.